Hello and welcome to the Weekend Wisdom series on Nightlight Astrology. I'm Whitney Kranz.
I'm Alexandra Blair.
And I am Alex Amorosi.
That was even better that time.
Y'all, we are
Yeah.
so excited to be here to present the what have we been calling it thanks to you, Alex? The Weekend News Desk
hmm
Astrology Report.
We are manning the weekend news desk
Yeah.
here at Nightlight Astrology. You will not miss anything that happens in the sky.
And we take that job very seriously, folks. We are here thanks to Adam Elenbaas and Nightlight Astrology. Adam is offering not only incredible courses at the moment, as always, as well as webinars. He's specifically promoting an incredible retreat to Mexico right now, his year 4 curriculum. So head over to nightlightastrology.com for all of the goodies there. But hang with us today because we are here to discuss Mercury's role in eclipse season. Now, why Mercury? Well, I had this little idea during Mercury retrograde as I was looking at Mercury's journey through the zodiac and noticing how in the retrograde of August, Mercury was being pulled back like a slingshot, right? We can think of that retrograde motion like the pulling back of a slingshot and being catapulted forward into eclipse season, where Mercury has quite a pivotal role here. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, it goes back to this prominent story that we're seeing this year. We know this year the outer planets have all shifted signs. We have eclipses every year, but eclipses reflect that massive amount of change as well. And so we're seeing the way the inner planets or the personal planets are sort of weaving together this story of the outers, right? And so, with that, it's almost as if Mercury is acting like a mirror to reflect our personal growth, our collective growth through this season. And so, today we are going to dive into the nitty gritty as Mercury would and look at a couple key dates through eclipse season, starting with the 0 degree new moon in Virgo on August 23rd. Now, in this weird space time continuum that is recording in advance, that hasn't happened yet. But for you, it has. So tell us in the comments what happened with Mercury during the Virgo new moon. Before we dive into it and start screen sharing, do you all, Alexandra, Alex, want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on what you said about how Mercury, Venus, the inner planets, but particularly Mercury and Venus for me this year have been really instrumental in hand holding Saturn and Neptune. We saw this in March, and Venus and Mercury kind of both went over the border from Pisces into Aries with Neptune and then retrograded back in to kind of grab Saturn and bring Saturn back over. The same was true for the opening square between Saturn and Jupiter that took place across the cardinal signs this summer. So Mercury conjoined Jupiter at 29 Gemini and then moved over into Cancer with Jupiter to perform that first square to Saturn there in the cardinal signs. And now Mercury is coming in to form this sort of like final opposition with Saturn in Pisces moment that's going to be taking place with this anaretic degree kind of eclipse new moon situation. So it's been really interesting to watch it all play out. And I really appreciate this topic. And then we're going to kind of dig into this today because I feel like Mercury is kind of hard at work doing all kinds of stuff.
It's also really easy to kind of discount Mercury and the moon because they move so fast sometimes. Just be like, well, yeah, Mercury, that transit's going to last about 4 days if Mercury's moving at full speed. But Mercury, especially right now, like you think where this slingshot got pulled back to was like just out of range of an opposition to Pluto. So it's like Mercury went back and picked up a gift from Pluto to bring forward And I don't know what kind of gift that's going to be. They can be good gifts from Pluto. They can be smelly gifts from Pluto, but they, they can be all sorts of gifts. But there's something about Mercury moving through this into the conjunction with the Sun, which we'll look at in Virgo, that's also carrying something from Pluto here. There's something about a transformative, cathartic is the word I think we always use for Pluto, but also that sense of there's an intensity and an urgency in this movement of Mercury in towards Virgo, which I think actually could be really good because Pluto is really good at kind of lighting a fire under you when you are sort of stagnating on something or something has gotten caught or stagnated. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of movement and shift not only because of Mercury, but obviously because of this new moon, which we're going to look at, and a number of other things. But I think it just adds to the sort of intensity and the urgency of whatever comes up. Not always bad, but it brings a Pluto-like quality along with it, I think.
That's really excuse me, guys. That's really interesting and a good point to start sharing the screen, right? Start digging into this chart. Yes, self-proclaimed chart nerd here. Uh, because I like how you bring Pluto into the fact here, right? This what we're sharing right now is the chart of August 23rd. It's our 0 degree new moon in Virgo. And this is not an eclipse. So why are we starting with it? Well, I think I gave it away in the last episode. I know I'm really thinking of this. We know that eclipses, you feel these sort of whispers of them ahead of time. And this particular new moon in Virgo at 0 degrees just feels like it is starting to tell the story of what eclipse season is bringing for us. So we can obviously see here on the screen, there is your new moon. You know, the 0 degree mark, it is such a symbolic degree of initiation, right? New beginnings. And so when we look at this mirrored with the eclipse that we will close out with, the 29 Virgo degree eclipse, we're getting a hell of a story here. And why does this matter anyway? Well, you caught in our last episode that Mercury is both the ruler and exalted in Virgo. And so Mercury has a lot to say about how this lunation is functioning, right? What's interesting that that Alex was reflecting on is that when Mercury stationed direct, it was engaging at 4 degrees across the way in an opposition with Pluto there. Now, isn't it you're talking and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, Pluto can bring disaster, but it can bring riches as well, right? With Mercury, the god of commerce, like I could see this actually as being some really beneficial new beginnings in financial matters for some folks as well. You know, it's all about how it sits in your natal chart, right? The other thing I think we want to pay attention to here is that Mercury is currently at this eclipse, sextiling with Mars. And it's so interesting because we talked about that slingshot motion, right? And that gaining of momentum. Mercury has actually just come into this exact aspect with Mars twice, and it's all because of its speed and velocity that it would do that. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because we don't see those sort of double aspects reflected super often. It's really only in these retrograde situations. I don't know. What do you all think about that?
Yeah, I think another important thing to note is that this lunation is happening square to Uranus
Oh,
in
of course.
Gemini. And so when I think about that, and we're thinking about the slingshot, and we're thinking about initiatory energy and inertia and things kicking off, the way I've really been looking at this lunation is kind of like it better be the place where you start this story, because Uranus is sort of like instigating. That's a word that we can use for the square, is like goading a little bit and saying, hey, come on, think about this in another way. Something that really kind of came up to me was this metaphor of maybe sobriety, and this kind of moment being the moment where you're like, maybe I need to look at my drinking problem or whatever it is. And it feels like when we kind of move through the story of this eclipse and how it develops to become this 29-degree anaretic eclipse with Mercury and Virgo opposite Saturn, conjunct the South Node, it's almost like this better be the moment you make that change that you're thinking about. Or to put it a little less threateningly, like this is a much more ideal moment to make that change that you're thinking about. And that's kind of what is coming up for me, like this electric discharge of material happening in Virgo here that becomes much more intense as the month goes on. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a we've talked about in our previous videos a lot about Virgo and the sign, and there's to me, Virgo is always about the harvest and what are you reaping from what you have sown? What are the seeds you have
Hmm.
planted? And I think looking at Uranus there, it's a little bit like uh, you're not bound to you may have to sometimes sort of like take the crops that you got from what you planted, but you can plant new crops. It's okay to plant new crops. Like it's okay to plant something new for the next year that will kind of come alive in a different way. I think sometimes, there's a really interesting tendency I think we have as humans to kind of plant seeds from a unlabeled seed packet. We just keep putting the same seed packet in the ground. We don't even know what they are, and it keeps coming up as something. We're like, oh, I keep getting this. And this is like something to me about like, why don't you take a look at what you're planting in the ground? Let's see what the seeds are, and then what am I going to get from this? And I think following one of the things that Virgo does very well, and I think Libra does this in a different way, is following the trail of consequence and causality. So just
Mm.
seeing like, and Virgo sometimes are hypersensitive to consequence. They're very afraid of what a consequence might be. But just being like, it doesn't have to be something where you're sort of attacking yourself in any way, but just evaluating, what's going on the spreadsheet here? What do I need to do to get to here? What kind of seeds do I need to plant to get to that place? And what will ultimately feel refreshing and liberating? Because I think that Uranian quality is not just erratic and electric, but it's liberating. It desires to feel free. And sometimes we can be just caught in a loop of our own sort of self-imprisonment in a pattern. And Uranus just comes along and shocks us out of it and says, like, there's an opportunity here to do something totally new. And it might involve, sitting back and trying a different strategy to just see what comes out on the other side.
Okay, I totally love that, Alex. And I love that you're talking specifically about planting seeds. Like, obviously, it's a great new moon metaphor, but it's so perfect for Virgo and harvest season. And it's bringing up the decans for me as well. Now, the first decan of Virgo belongs to the sun. It's interesting. It's almost like, okay, with Mercury in the sun sign and the lunation happening in the sun's decan, there's like this weird mutual reception that's happening there, right? And when we look at the decans, we can associate with the cards in the minor arcana of the tarot. And this particular decan is representative of the Eight of Pentacles, which is basically a man working at his workbench, right? A person. We won't necessarily gender him in this scenario. It is a Mercury episode anyway, right? So this person's working at the workbench, right? And it is all about staying focused and dedication and mastery, right? And that is such a strong suit of Mercury, the way, oh, pulling it out for us.
Perf.
I mean, that person does have a mustache, so I love it. Yes, yes, it's this focus, right? And, there is the Uranian quality of it as well feels so prominent here, right? Because Uranus is also in Mercury's sign. They're both in Mercury's bounds. It's like Mercury, Mercury, Mercury. And it's giving this sort of like, I talked about it in a recent podcast episode. It's like really speaking to that magical element that is the magician or Hermes Trismegistus, right? That there is alchemical power in our dedication, right? And like you so aptly said, Alexander, it's like one of those things, if we're not working on it, if we're not working toward this change, if we're not dedicated to the change that's brought forward in that sobering moment, like this 29-degree eclipse could be downright spooky for you, right? So let's do what we can now to put the pieces in place, the systems in place, the daily habits in place in order to get there, right? Did you guys want to say anything else on this before we move forward to September?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. But even in saying no, I say yes. Actually, I was going to say no, but I have one thing to say. So
Such
yes
a
is the answer.
Gemini.
So yes is the answer. I feel like Adam talks really eloquently about this on elsewhere on his channel, so I don't want to hit the point home too hard. But I hear a lot from clients and from people who talk about astrology. They're like, well, what's the sense in knowing that this is coming? Like, we can't change our fate. Can we change our fate? Like, this is a big debate, right? And I feel like this is one of those key moments where I'm sure people are thinking about that. I think about that all the time. Like, does me knowing make any difference? And I just have to say that I don't, I'm humble enough to not even guess at why it works or how it works. But I do see a difference between clients who are trying and clients who feel like they can't try or maybe feel stuck in some way. So even if it's something small, this is where I think people get stuck because they think, oh, if we use my sobriety example, they're like, well, I can't get sober tomorrow. And it's like, okay, but you could do some googling, you could read a book, you could tell a friend, you could talk, any small thing is the seed planting, to Alex's point. We're just trying to get the seeds that go into the ground to like be what we want to grow at the end of the season. Like, that's actually all that needs to happen. So it can be really small, and I just want to encourage people to think about that. Like, no need to collapse in agony because you can't accomplish what you need to accomplish 10 years from now. Like, just take that small step.
And I would just add, this is so beautiful, you guys. Just add, what do you really want? That's the thing that I would really, really think about. Like, is we don't have to get the whole fate free will discussion going. I'll
Well,
spare
because we'll
it.
be here for
I
I
hours.
know,
will be here. I
I
know.
didn't want to
I
go
know.
there, but
I know it's so tempting. But just when you look at stuff, what astrology I think does is it provides a window of opportunity. You get to see some things more clearly than you might at another time. And there's always a chance for an action in that point, a choice, a choice of what you want to do. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's life just comes along with the good stuff and the bad stuff, and that happens. But I think it's really important, especially when Uranus is involved, is like, what would make me feel free, but also make me feel free in a way that I know I'm going to have to be wearing my big person pants at the end of this because Saturn's going to be the sort of punctuation mark on the end of this series. Uranus can
Mhm.
get adolescent really fast. And, I just want to be free. I just want to take the car, that kind of feeling. And Saturn is, the last sort of place that's going to be visited in this whole cycle. And Saturn's going to be like, yeah, but did you do this in a way that's responsible and mature? Did you do this in a way that shows that you're willing to accept some responsibility, authority, and maturity? So that's just a way to look at this sequence. But then you have choices within that. It'll highlight that for you internally.
Mhm.
Just paying attention to it.
That's beautiful, you guys. This is such a rich conversation. I'm sorry, it also incited conversation from my dog. So if you heard that, sorry about it. Um, so let's move on to September then, shall we? Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time here with Mercury's entrance into Virgo on September 2nd because we talked so much about the all of the significations around Mercury in Virgo in our last episode. So if you didn't watch last weekend's episode on the dignities of Virgo, then be sure to go back to that one for a review. Oh, and I'll just take it forward one day. There we go. So Mercury enters Virgo on September 2nd. I think it is worth reiterating the fact that obviously this is, as we've already mentioned, Mercury's domicile and exaltation. Mercury is also squaring Uranus at this moment as well, right? Reinforcing those concepts of change that we just talked about. And a from a perspective of how this all fits in, like if we are following Alexandra's advice and just paying attention, right? Maybe it's not the big act itself, right? You can't get sober in one day. Maybe it is paying attention. Is Mercury's entrance into Virgo part of what gives us sort of this like new information or a new exchange of information that can help lead to this particular goal that we may be working toward? Do you guys want to say anything here?
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about this in the previous weekend wisdom episode. So definitely, if you're interested in thinking about Mercury and Virgo, go back and we visited some fun charts. But I think we discussed the fact that sometimes a planet that is strong is not always the same thing as a planet that is bringing really pleasant subjective experiences into our life. And I think Virgo is definitely a strong character for Mercury. Mercury is both in domicile and exaltation. And in that episode, we kind of compared that to like an eccentric hotel owner who lives in the hotel too and like has a lot of weird guests and has a lot of neurotic little rules. And that's kind of what Mercury's doing here. So I'm excited to talk through more of what's happening, but I think we're good now for Mercury and Virgo for me. What do you think, Alex?
No, I agree. I just, quickly want to mention, from the new moon and then Mercury's entrance into Virgo, both will be conjunct the fixed star Regulus. And I just want to point that out because it's really
Mm.
important. It's in very powerful starts. It's actually in Leo. So you have there's I think two or three stars that form the head of the lion, and then Regulus is the center point, heart of the lion. And it actually, because of precession, is now in 0 degrees of Virgo. There's a lot of solar energy behind all of these movements into the initial part of Virgo. Like you
Hmm.
pointed out, Whitney, like this is the decan of the sun. This is the fixed star Regulus, which has a lot to do with leadership and using leadership effectively. And Bernadette Brady always talks about Regulus is like the downfall of Regulus is always when you seek vengeance, and that
Mm.
vengeance can bring about a downfall with Regulus. But it's also very much there's prominence to this new moon. There's prominence to Mercury's entrance here. It always is when any planet moves into this first part of Virgo. And I just want also think it's interesting that concurrently with this happening, Jupiter takes on a much bigger background role because Saturn has moved back into Pisces and Jupiter is in a superior square to Mars in Libra. So there's a sense here with like anything that feels like it's prominent and eccentric has a kind of soft landing. It's like
Hmm.
it's like yeah. Well, think if there's something you're going to do here that feels like, oh my God, I'm really going to take a leap. It's like there's like a net somewhere. Jupiter's got a net for you. So I think like I just wanted to point out, that the background noise feels really nice having Jupiter very strong and Jupiter also sort of responsible for and in a powerful position over both malefics at this point.
I love that fact. I love that from this vantage point, yes, Jupiter is sort of strengthened as that safety net. That's so interesting you bring that up, Alex, because Alexandra and I were having this conversation offline where, Jupiter is like the trapeze artist, like just go and do the tricks, right? But sometimes we don't know or understand that there is or is not a safety net there to catch us. But Jupiter is showing us here in this moment that he is a strong safety net for sure.
Mm,
I love that.
mm, mm.
Cool. Okay, so let's go further then. We have the Pisces total lunar eclipse happening on September 7th. And let me just move the clock a couple hours to get the moon in the right place. It's at 15 degrees exactly. I think this one is really interesting because 15 degrees of Virgo is actually Mercury's exaltation degree. And that certainly says kind of what the sun is doing in opposition to this moon right now, right? Kind of combing through the details while the moon in Jupiter's sign is trying to understand the big picture or reflecting the big picture back to us. Um, you know, the what we can also say with Jupiter ruling this moon is that of all the eclipses happening here in September, this Jupiter one, this Jupiter ruled one looks pretty nice, doesn't it? With the moon in this sort of wide trine to Jupiter in its exaltation. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it looks a lot nicer. And to be honest, I think it looks nicer than any of the Pisces eclipses we saw previously. And it only kind of gets softer just from where the astrology goes as things start going through Scorpio and we get these grand water trines that are really beautiful through winter. Um, this looks nicer, but in some ways, it may be that the work gets harder, but it's like, okay, I have a stable ground. Our friend Sarah, posh, very talented astrologer, but she used this analogy ages ago that I've been toting around where it's like you win at a video game and you're excited because you get to go to the next level, but often the next level is harder. It's a new challenge. And there's like excitement there and there's real victory. That's kind of what feels like it's happening in Pisces. I think Saturn at 29 of anything is spooky and it deserves our side eye. But I do think this looks nicer than what was happening previously. And you can go back and look at the previous dates because there was a previous uh there were some previous eclipses that were pinging some of these degrees. Like there was like a 29 Pisces, there was like a 18 Pisces. So you can go back and look because from March 2015 through February 2017, that's when we had those previous Pisces eclipses. So you might take a look at that or reflect on this more recent series and see what was going on there. It feels like there's really a new appetite for work and that Saturn is in a much more constructive place in my opinion. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's something to me with Saturn always around your capability and that you're capable of things. I think it's so easy to two-dimensionally think of Saturn as just like, coming along and taking your candy and running away. And I think that that's a very two-dimensional way to look at it. I think that Saturn really a lot of times is saying like, here's a challenge and you're fully capable of doing it. And with Jupiter, especially with Jupiter in such a beautiful relationship to the actual
Mm-hmm.
eclipse, it's like sometimes, I think of like the North Node and the South Node with the eclipses is like the beginning of a big cycle with the North Node and the end of a long cycle with the South Node.
Mhm.
And this feels like you're beginning a new, more responsible, more mature, more maybe even imaginative, expansive cycle than you have thought you could do. And that feels friggin' scary sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's not what you're used to. And am I able to do this? And am I capable of doing this? And I think the South Node, with the sun, to me says something about like, sometimes Virgo can get lost. And as we've talked about in previous videos, I have tons of planets in Virgo. I have a lot of Virgo clients. Virgo can get lost in the sort of like, I cannot get it perfect. I cannot heal everybody. I cannot make everybody better. I cannot make every little thing in my body absolutely perfect. So it's not even worth trying. Like there's a sort of defeatist attitude that can come up with that perfectionism. And I think like if we can flush some of that and be like, I am capable of doing great things, hard things, but ultimately rewarding things. And it doesn't all have to be perfect. It doesn't all have to have everything done. I can't do everything for everybody or save everybody. It like relieving that pressure could really shoot you off in a really cool new direction here. But again, we're Saturn's roaming now closer um to all of this, and that's usually to me about like big person pants time, like big person pants time. Yeah.
Big person pants
Yeah.
time.
Well, like,
Pull
let's see
up,
what you can do. You can do
pull
it.
up those bootstraps, baby.
Let's get to work. Let's get to work.
Time to dig in. No,
It
I
kind of,
think.
oh,
Oh,
go
no,
ahead.
you go,
It kind of
Alexandra.
reminds me of like I have talked on Adam's channel before, but I have a lot of food sensitivities, and that all or nothing thinking is it's just like the most insidious trap of like,
Mm.
oh no, I accidentally had wheat, so dot dot dot. I guess this weekend is lost. Like it happens so fast. Or, when I first kind of like found out about a lot of these food sensitivities, I had that very Uranian rebellion. I was like, you can't tell me I can't eat this and that and this and that. And it's just like, who am I saying that to? It's my own body. What do you mean? Of course, I should want to do that. But it took me years to get to the place where I actually did want to treat my body with that kind of respect. That's how I think of it now. But at the time, it was like, well, what do you mean? I have to limit my whole life. And it didn't feel like an empowering kind of work. So it just was thinking about that as you were talking. And it felt relevant.
Mm. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it shows us kind of this dynamic that we're dealing with, like this bigger picture, this greater goal or idea or sense of consciousness, right? Then just very much in opposition, quite literally, with what's happening here with the sun, right? And in terms of before we move on to our next highlight date here, I just want to point out too that the condition of Mercury at this moment, Mercury is a morning star, and yeah, it's getting real close to the sun there. But Mercury is what's called in its own chariot. So Mercury has its own agency here to sort of live out its own wills and ideals. And I thought that was just worth mentioning before we move on, right? Because when we're going to move on here and show you on the 13th of September, that we have a Mercury cazimi. Mercury will be reborn at the heart of the sun. So when this happens, obviously, Mercury becomes reborn in its evening star phase. We have talked so many times on this channel about Mercury cazimis because Mercury travels through the zodiac really just about as quickly as the sun does, right? Give and take its retrograde motion. We get a couple Mercury cazimis a year. But because Mercury is in direct motion at this time, this is what's called a superior cazimi. And one of the things I love about Alexandra's style is that she's this date gatherer, right? And very recently, she helped connect the dots for me regarding the cycles of these Mercury cazimis and how they can connect with each other, but also other lunations as well. So it's one of those things, right, where if you, I think sometimes when we talk about how astrology can become sensationalized and we talk about this day you will get the most magical downloads that you have ever received and it's such a great moment, like, yeah, sure, you might, but it might also just be quieter. And so, one of the things that I know I like to do with a Mercury cazimi is journal, because then we can look back and reflect on what that might mean in sort of the building of Mercury's cycle. Now, Mercury happens to be my time lord this year, so maybe I'm talking a little bit about that as well. But it's interesting for me to see here. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think if Mercury's your time lord this year, you definitely want to be paying attention to those gazimis and the retrogrades and the ingresses and the stuff happening in Virgo. So keep that little list on hand. But yeah, I think Mercury cazimi, it is very easy to get swept up in that astrology sensationalism and assume that you're going to receive some incredible news. I don't know about that for this one. I'm not feeling bad news from this either, but I just think this is maybe even a very internal something from your own intuition, something from your gut, your Virgo and gut. that is clarifying around your own priorities or sense of what you're building towards with this double new moon situation in Virgo that's going to culminate in that eclipse. It's also happening very close to the South Node, so it's giving me that feeling of the exact moment when the ick crests into the knowing of action. It's like you had the ick at that new moon, and now you're like, now I act. That means I actually have to take action on this. I can't go back. And there might be just some knowledge in your gut of the rearranging of that context to make you feel more capable of heading into that final lunation eclipse of this little cycle.
Yeah, I think that there's a so this begins a new cycle for Mercury. The inferior conjunction begins a new cycle, and the cycles usually go for about three-ish months. And this is a really interesting cycle to begin after, with Mercury and the Sun on the other side of the South Node here. This sense of like the new beginning that's could be a very promising new beginning coming with everything we've just talked about, like the big person pants and the letting go of the old cycle and the perfectionism and the fussing, the overdoing the fussiness and stuff like that. And I think it can be a very good powerful cycle for the next 3 months, but it's like there's something about Mercury being refreshed where I just so glad you guys are talking about this, where I think some people are looking, we look for extremes sometimes in astrology. We're looking for like, Saturn's coming, it's going to be the worst. Jupiter's coming, it's going to be the best. And this is really like, it's internal and sometimes kind of unconscious, and sometimes you notice it and sometimes you don't. But this is a really good day to notice like, is an idea refreshed? Is a thought refreshed? Is something refreshed in some way? Or do you have a new perspective on it that comes after all of this kind of letting go stuff that we've been talking about and the planting the seeds and knowing the seed packet and all of that? What becomes highlighted? And I think astrology just kind of is really good for showing like, where the spotlight is being shined. And I think right now it's like, okay, if I'm going to do all this new big vision stuff, here are the organized ideas and principles and things I need to do in order to do that. This is the spreadsheet I need in order to get that done.
Bringing spreadsheets into the conversation, Alex. Oh boy.
I
That's some
literally
Virgo
hate
BS right
spreadsheets.
there.
I know, I know. Like I hate them. Even though I have all this Virgo, because I have the Sag on the other side of it, I'm like, spreadsheets are dumb. I
Oh,
can't follow it.
I'm so traumatized from my corporate job. No, I want to point out, I think you said something really important there, Alex, that um perspective, like this is helping to give us perspective. And I kind of see that happening in this conjunction as well, right? That Mercury's phasal change from a morning star out there working so hard, right? Moving toward its goals, right? This phasal change almost tells the story of what's happening here with our eclipses, right? Like as we now move closer to this solar eclipse at 29 degrees Virgo, it's like with Mercury transitioning into a softer evening star, it's a way that we sort of learn to let go or clear away or relate rather than strive. I see that storyline kind of here metaphorically in this conjunction too, which seems important. So, should we move on now? We've got the next highlight date on our list for Mercury is the 18th of September. On September 18th, you see it there, Mercury at 0 degrees Libra. Now, obviously, what happens here when Mercury enters Libra, the first thing it does is oppose Neptune. It's already gone through this opposition to Saturn. We were talking earlier about the importance of Saturn and sort of the growth cycle that we're moving through here with Saturn. So that feels really prominent. We also cannot forget that when Mercury moves into this 0 degree point of Libra, it is forming or echoing again this kite formation that first came about in the middle slash early August when Mars entered Libra. And so I think it's really interesting because basically as planets enter Libra this fall, the sun will follow and eventually Venus, right? The Mercury is activating this first grand air trine, right? And simultaneously pinging off the rest of these planets into this big old kite formation here. And, you know, I like I'm just gonna be real. That when Mars opposed Saturn and Neptune from that 0 degree point of Libra, I know a lot of people struggled with that, and I was one of them. I was like so overwhelmed. It was in the middle of Mercury retrograde. There were so many like reschedules and everything happening. And so anytime change happens, right, especially forced change, which feels prominent with Mars in that sort of position holding the tension of that kite, anything that's forced is going to feel tough, right? But what I see happening here is there's a way that we've been able to integrate and work with this change in a way that we can be a little bit more objective about it or intellectual about it, right? Rather than feeling the weight, we can sort of understand what this is working all towards. What do you all think?
I think this is a really interesting moment for all of these astrological jargon conditions because what's happening here is that Mercury has moved out of its domicile exaltation of Virgo. It's moving into Libra. And at the same time, Venus is about to move into Virgo. So Venus typically not that happy in Virgo, but at this time, Venus and Mercury will have this condition called mutual reception where they're in each other's signs. I think it's interesting, Alex, you mentioned Regulus. So Venus there at
Mm,
Regulus 29,
Mhm.
then 0 with the moon. But to me, this moment really is the beginning of the fall of the solar figure and the solar condition this fall, this autumn, because the sun will hit this reckoning point at 29 Virgo and then plunge into the sign of its fall, Libra, immediately in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. Virgo was previously in Leo, kind of strengthening the solar. She's coming into the sign of her fall of Virgo as well. There is that mutual reception that helps things a little bit. But to me, this is like a turning point, a major turning point in this cycle that I don't like where this goes for solar figures or like for the solar personally. Thinking about the sun crossing over into this Libra space, forming up that kite with Pluto and Uranus, like it doesn't feel as fun and exciting, even as the Mars one did to me. I was overwhelmed too, Whitney. Obviously, I was so overwhelmed, but it was kind of like fun. I was like a kite, I was flying. When the sun comes in and it's got like Pluto singing songs in its ear and it's like in the sign of its fall and the light is dying, and we got Uranus, it's like it just doesn't feel as fun. So for me, this is really like the hinge point where although the dignity seems to like be okay, meaning it could be worse. I don't like love how this looks or how this goes from here personally. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
It's it's sobering for sure. Anytime the sun hits Saturn,
Yep.
that solar, to extend what you're saying, Alexandra, it's like this is a time where if you get too invested in your own solar light, it could not go well.
Right.
And
That's
it,
exactly what I mean by solar
yeah,
figures. Thank you for
yeah.
clarifying.
And it could easily be, like you could see it with solar figures. Adam says it all the time. Sun and Saturn, you could see solar figures, leaders,
Yeah,
fathers, grandfathers, there's
culturally.
stuff
Yeah.
going culturally or family, familially, something like that. Familially, is that a word? Anyways,
it is now.
it is now. It just be a familially. Um, but there's the thing I think about a kite because I just kind of look at the energy of it is it's very easy to get caught in the opposition. of the kite because it feels like, Saturn, Neptune's just kind of sitting there being like, chill, man, don't do your solar thing, just chill. And then there's like this, but you have a workaround with the kite. You have these easy trines through Pluto and Uranus where it's like, trine doesn't always mean easy, but it means there's somewhere if you get off of the myopic view that the opposition is the only thing that's going to get you where you want to go. In other words, the sun and Neptune or the sun and Saturn is the only thing that's going to get you where you want to go. And you look like, what do I need to transform and what do I need to think about in a totally different from a totally different point of view? What do I need to like free myself from in terms of the logjam that may be appearing or maybe something that like I'm noticing a logjam I've created for myself or it's in my mind or my subconscious, whatever it is. I think that for sure, with Venus moving into Virgo, um, this is where, well, let me say it this way. With Mercury having moved into Libra, the Sun moving into Libra, air signs being more highlighted now with this grand trine, collaboration and coming off of your ego's throne can feel very, very helpful. Communication, relating, talking to others, being in a sort of like I am part of the wheel, I am not the wheel itself. I think if you get caught in the sort of like, but I am the sun and the sun must shine, there's a big uh, probability that there will be some consequence to that.
I think
For
that
this.
that's also related to Venus being in Virgo. And it's almost like
Yeah.
collaboration and relational stuff can be a remediation for a wounded Venus because
Yes.
there's another part where it's like nobody would understand, or I'm going to be too much of a burden if I say this stuff, or
Yeah.
this is too intense, or maybe like people don't understand me. Like those kinds of like wounded Venus thoughts are also not helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Reaching out and knowing that you're part of a great system that wants to help you. It's there. It's just you got to look for it a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that because that was one of the, I just moved our chart forward
Mhm.
to the eclipse point, right? Because we basically started talking about it anyway. That's exactly what we're talking about here now with Venus in the sign of Virgo. Um, it's this importance of support, and as we look at this objectively spooky moon happening here, like right with the sun moving into the darkest point of the year, this sort of precipice, this liminal space of equal light and dark. It is so important that we know who we can go to for support, that we have our support structures around us. It feels really, really important right now. I mean, this is basically what we have just spoken about, right? With the sun I'm sorry, the partial solar eclipse in Virgo at 29 degrees opposing Saturn and Neptune, coming into that same kite formation that we've been talking about. Here with Mercury at right now 6 degrees of Libra, it's interesting to note as well that Mercury is in Saturn's bound. It's really giving that, again, the same themes are being echoed through this cycle, right? The tension of growth. And so, as we're working to sort of clear away what's no longer working, like we need to think about it. I'm so glad you both brought up the importance of Venus here. Not only the importance of support, but like what we are giving others, like what we are leaving in terms of legacy as we move forward. I can see Alex is jamming over there. I love it. Jump
I
in,
was
tell me
just
about
really
it.
wholeheartedly agree with that, like in a big way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll bring it back to the decan at this moment too, because this particular decan of Virgo, the last decan of Virgo, decan 3, is Mercury's decan. So again, Mercury, 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 that's why we're talking about it. But this decan is associated with the 10 of Pentacles, and the 10 of Pentacles is a card that is, I mean, it's a in the midst of what looks pretty spooky here, like the Ten of Pentacles is a good card, but it also echoes death in a way because in the Ten of Pentacles, you have, you know, a person near the end of his life reflecting on all they've done and the joy they've brought the kids they're surrounded by and the dogs they're surrounded by and this beautiful land on which they sit. And it's this view of like what we have generated will last, right? It's like people are so important. Oh, cool. What is this
This
deck
is
that you're
the
using,
this is the
Alex?
my what is it? Oh, I was just gonna say Myers-Briggs. It's not the Myers-Briggs. Jesus Christ.
Myers-Briggs.
Morgan Greer. I was like,
It's the
you're
INFP
it's the
deck.
INF 10 of Pentacles.
And an ENFP.
This is the Morgan Greer tarot. This
Oh,
is I've had this
beautiful.
deck for years, the first deck I ever bought. But yeah, it's the idea of like the doors closing, Whitney, right? Like
Yeah.
they've gone into somewhere a chapter is beginning internally, but something has ended, but it's fruitful. Yeah.
You know what that particular illustration is giving? It's like with these warriors, these knights, it's like they've come to Valhalla, right? In
Yeah.
Norse mythology,
Yeah.
right? Like that's and so now let's partake in what is our own heaven, you know?
Yeah.
That, I love
Yeah.
it. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this part, I mentioned the different dignity conditions. I feel like we do have those to consider. I don't know that it makes it nicer on a subjective experience level here on Earth. Might make it more productive. And I actually, maybe a controversial Saturn loving take, I actually feel like Saturn is such a gift in this
Yeah.
chart. Like it
Yeah.
just feels like Saturn could be a real ally if you are that kind of person. I think in any other circumstance, it would be so scary. And it certainly makes it ups the stakes. It gives it a sense of gravity, and there's a very real sense of stakes there. But it's like Saturn is involved again in that trine with Jupiter, even stronger at this point. That feels really productive. And that continues on as Mars comes into Scorpio and all the other planets come into Scorpio. It turns into like those water trines for Saturn. I just am not that worried about Saturn there. In Pisces, for me, it's more about those wounded Venus thoughts coming up
Mhm.
in Virgo. That's like, that maxim where they say, like, how can anyone love you if you don't love yourself? Or maybe a crisis point where it's like, in hindsight, you look back, or if you're watching a movie and you're just watching this character suffer and carry all this weight, and you're thinking, just tell everybody what's going on. Just be honest about what's going on with you and bring people into the moment. And they can't for whatever reason. And that to me feels like more of the story that's going on here, like living in an echo chamber of shame, feeling cut off, and that's kind of why I feel like Saturn is an ally, because there's like a real moment right here where you could choose to do something different. It might be hard. It might be very hard. It might be foreign. It might require letting people see you in ways you didn't ever want to be seen. And it might require developing some real backbone around saying no, discernment, cutting out people who are kind of like not the right people for you. But that's how the story feels to me. What do you think, Alex?
I really love the way the direction you're going with this, Alexandra, because I think that one of the, you said shame. I would also offer with Virgo always guilt. That there's a, I feel guilty. I don't, like you said before, like I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to, I don't want to put myself in. And the
Hmm.
thing that I think that's with the air, the relatability air stuff going on in the air, ha ha ha, is but I'm chi, is this sense of like people who are close to you, who love you, who want the best for you want you to tell them things like that. They want, even when it's like, I want to tell you about something I'm not particularly proud of that I did once, or I'm going to tell you something else that I might be beating myself up for. And like sometimes it's like, when you're worried about having a conversation with someone and you suddenly realize like they've been having the same thing. You're like, oh, thank God
Hmm.
you brought it up because I wanted to bring that up. And even just in the acknowledgement, there's like a and that's where I see like these trines, right, with Pluto and Uranus is like that's sort of like clears out that stagnation. It clears out that tension. It clears out like this. Sometimes, you're kind of like dancing around someone because you don't want to say it or get involved in like, well, I don't want to burden you and I'm not thinking this and I don't want you to think that I think and all that stuff. And rather than trying to play that game, just being like, well, let's have this conversation. And even just acknowledging that frees up so much and often can be very, very healing. It's important to remember too. I think, Virgo, one of my first astrology teachers up here used to say always she saw Virgo as a sign of healing and the sign of the healer. And she,
Hmm.
and it's really has the sense of like that can be massively healing of like, oh, okay, we're both thinking the same thing. Let's game this out. Let's figure this out. The other thing I just want to say quickly too is if Jupiter were debilitated, I'm going to bring it back to Jupiter. If Jupiter were debilitated right now, I'd be much more worried. I
It's
think
way scarier.
way scary because Jupiter. Let's just take a year of exalted Jupiter and give thanks.
Yeah.
Um, because Jupiter is sitting in the superior relationship to all of this by sextile in Virgo and by square in Libra. That does bring sort of a nice cloak. Again, I don't know if if challenging stuff happens, it doesn't necessarily make it less challenging, but it's like Jupiter tends to either soften things or I always say brings the better angels of where something at least winds up. So
Hmm.
I just love Jupiter and I just want to give him a high five. And I love Saturn. I'm really glad you brought that up about Saturn too, because I think that Saturn is a very important point of this and helpful.
Well, and isn't that why it's at Saturn 28, 29 degrees? Isn't that why it is easier this time around? Because Jupiter in its exaltation is ruling over that Saturn right now, right? And it's a retrograde. We've
And
been
witnessing,
here
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. I love what you both said about shame as well and the importance of, I said having our support system, but that's the idea, right? Because shame itself really takes root in silence, in the creepy, dark, deep places where we don't share, right? Once you start sharing, all of the sudden, these things that we had in our head that were so shameful, they begin to become uncloaked, right? And we see them for what they are. And so that seems like just a good tie-in and a really important piece of this.
Hmm. Absolutely. Brené Brown says it all the time. Shame cannot stand to be spoken or cannot stand to be
Sure.
seen. Something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's
Yeah.
like
exactly.
a major thing in Ficino lore of the sun and light generally being an antidote for darkness. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all of human history, I guess, right there. That's all of archetypal thought for history. But it's an interesting situation when the sun opposes Saturn because of
Yeah.
that specifically. It's like the Saturnian darkness actually can't withstand being dragged into the solar light. It's like black mold too. Once you see it, you can like actually dispatch it and get rid of it and treat it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Sun heals. I love it. Well,
Speaking
so I
of, take
think
us to the weak sun.
right? That
To
brings
wrap it up.
us that brings us to the moment where the sun enters Libra on 9/22. In terms of the standpoint of Mercury here, when the sun enters Libra, well, all of a sudden that means, Mercury was protected from combustion while the sign boundary was in the way, right? And now that the sun enters Libra, well, now Mercury is combust all of a sudden again, right? And so, Alexander, you said something, I can't exactly remember what it was, but like the importance of honesty, right? And I see it as being like forthcoming, right, with our information because, like, as Mercury becomes combust and we're like sort of cleaning up from this partial solar eclipse, I think it's important that we remember here that Mercury is not doing so hot. Or actually, it's the opposite. Mercury is really hot right now. It's too hot to function, right? Because even though the sun is, here in Libra in the darkest place of the year, it's still heating up Mercury. And so I think that's a really important thing to remember, like as we move into the darkness, to like sort of fact check and understand that information. What all do you have to say on when the sun enters Libra and here's Mercury in its path?
Yeah, this is a moment, one of those moments that makes me reflect on the privilege that we have to be talking to an astrology audience because our
Yes.
audience has their journals out right now. Like,
Mm.
our audience is like reflecting on their lives every day and trying to make improvements, even if they're trapped, even if they're stuck, even if they're totally human. But I think there's like there's some undergrounding that happens here. I don't know how prevalent that's going to be in this audience because we have, like I said, some of the best audience in the world, particularly the Nightlight audience, incredible. And I know my audience on YouTube is incredible too. But there's an undergrounding that happens here with Mars coming into Scorpio, with the Sun moving into its fall. This is where like some of those solar figures are like going somewhere masked maybe, or going somewhere that's more of like a little anti-hero arc, in my opinion. And it feels not super necessarily like definitionally constructive, although of course we all have masks that we need to wear in certain environments, but it just kind of feels not that. It was reminding me of the quote from, oh my gosh, the movie's escaping me, but it's a Marlon Brando movie. I could have been a contender, you know? And it's like one of those feelings of like, I could have had everything, but I lost it all. And now I'm going to like, dot, 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 become
A
an
streetcar
anti-hero.
named Desire.
No, it's the one where he's the boxer.
The boxer. Oh, I don't know.
I don't remember. I'm gonna Google it as soon as I stop talking. But yeah. So anyway, I don't want to depress everybody and make everybody feel sad and skeptical about what's going on there. But I think if you're not watching out, there some of that rhetoric might start popping up. Like, oh, I knew nobody was gonna have my back. I knew that I should have just kept it to myself. Should have kept my nose down. I think there's a real risk of that here. But of course, the sun goes through Libra every year, you guys. Mars goes through Scorpio every year. So I don't think we're in danger on a personal level of anything toxic or terrifying. But it'll be really interesting to see what kind of energy the sun brings into that kite.
Yeah. Whitney, is the first decan of Libra the Four of Swords in tarot?
I can't remember off the top of
I'm
my
trying to
head.
remember.
I'd
I
have
don't
to
have
look
my
it
chart in
up.
front of me, but I'm thinking like Gemini would
I don't
be,
either. Yeah.
yeah, I
First decan
think
of
it is.
Libra.
Yeah. Um, because it strikes me like we've been through this eclipse season will probably have something where like all the things we talked about, constructive and good and blah, 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 and doing this stuff, you might just need to chill, especially with the sun opposing Neptune. It might just be something where it's like, again, kind of extending the theme of what we were talking about before, you reach the limits of your own capability, your individual capability. And there's something about like, I need to chill for a while. I need to rest. I feel often when the sun and Neptune are involved in hard aspect, there's something around feeling tired or drained of energy or feeling like your energy is just more porous and nebulous. Um, but I think it also is a deconstruction of the solar's type of thinking. That's kind of like
It
that
is. It's
solar.
the Two of Swords.
It's the
That's
two of
so
swords.
right.
Okay, yeah, yeah, exactly,
Slicing
right.
through.
Slicing through. And so it's like the sun in Libra to me, I've always described as an ambivalent sun, and the sun doesn't want to be ambivalent. The sun
Mhm.
doesn't want to be bifurcated. The sun doesn't want to have the two of swords. It doesn't want to have two decisions to make. It wants to just have a unified direction forward. This is a time where it's just like letting that part of you have a little bit of a break and a rest, and maybe just kind of letting it soften a little bit could feel really good. The thing that I like that Mercury for Mercury that does get a little hand here, hand up, hand hold, whatever we'll call it, is the mutual reception with Venus at this point, which I like too. That there's a okay, they've got a little bit of support there, but I think that it requires a lot of relating, a lot of communicating, a lot of being clear in your communication, everything we were just talking about, and that could ultimately feel a lot better. But I love that idea of like the solar light becomes dimmed in some way now,
That
in a big
Mars
way
is
this year.
such a bully in that sextile.
I know,
That's ridiculous.
I know, I know.
Mars in Scorpio looking at Venus in Virgo laughing. Like that's humiliation
Yeah.
sextile right there. That's what's happening between those
And
two.
squaring Pluto at the same time, you know?
That's
Yeah.
so scary.
Yeah.
Oh, Whitney, you're muted. Also, I looked up the movie. It's on the waterfront.
On the
Of
waterfront. That's
course.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
You guys and your movie prowess. You just have to leave me with a list of to watch so I
We're still
can
waiting on you to watch
come
Interstellar,
prepared.
and
I
I told
know.
Whitney I would watch it when she does. I'm gonna watch it.
Oh,
So
Well, okay, I
so good.
have a week off here coming up, and so I bet there will be some movie time here.
nice.
I
Cool.
love it. Well, I think this brings us to a great moment to close this out. If you know anything about me and my kind of astrology, I am all about reflection and how we can understand not only what's happening, right, but how it can help us move through these moments with grace. Because obviously, eclipse season means change, it means growth. We are being directed toward our path, whether it feels great or not, right? So, what can help us through this? Journal prompts. And so the three of us worked to create some journal prompts for you so that you as well can reflect. I mean, Mercury is the god of communication and writing. There is no better way to honor Mercury, in my opinion, than to write about it. So let me share. We put these together in a pretty little. Can you guys see that?
Mm-mm.
No,
Nope.
you can't do it yet.
No,
Now
there
we
it is.
can.
Now you
It's coming.
can.
It's coming. There you go.
There we go. Just a little delay. So I'll take the first, Alex will take the second, and Alexandra will redo the third. So while you're journaling this month, where were you once compelled to act with force? And where now can you act with intellect, rationale, strategy, or instinct instead?
What newness are you alchemizing in the Virgo area of your chart? What must you clear away to make room for these new beginnings?
And where can you elevate the level of care that you're offering yourself to match the level of care that you're offering to others? And I think in addition, we talked about today, like, can you reach out to others? Can you actually like include others in your thinking? So that might be an interesting place to start with some of that Venus stuff.
Mm.
I love it. This feels so rich. It feels so good, so
Mhm.
prepared. If you want to take those prompts and journal with them, go ahead and screenshot this so you can come back to it later when you are in a time of reflective goodness. You know, that's all that we had for you planned today. Are there any, before we close out with where you all can find us and our work, is there anything else that Alexandra, you both wanted to add? All
No,
right.
we have really
Wrung
gone
the
there with
towel out.
Mercury. Yeah. If you guys don't know about Virgo by this point, and
Yeah.
Mercury, yeah, yeah, we've done. That was great. That was really, really fun.
Good, good. This was so fun. Thank you for indulging me with this topic. I love to look with a microscope at all of our astrological transits. You know, I think Alexandra has said this before that Whitney could probably talk about one transit for an entire hour, and it's true.
We love that about you.
We do.
So on that note, I'll go first. You all can find me and my work at astroarcana.com. You can book a reading with me there. I offer both birth chart and transit readings, especially if you're looking for support during this eclipse season. That is the focus of my practice right now. You can also connect with me on Instagram and YouTube, where I also have my podcast, House of Good Spirit. There we'll have lots of good eclipse coverage on both Instagram and YouTube. And find me there at astro.arcana.astrology.
Love it. I am the number nine, Nine Lives Astrology, and it's ninelivesastrology.com, and it's Nine Lives Astrology on Instagram and YouTube. I put out weekly astrology videos, and I have really fun stuff coming up for September, October, so you don't want to miss it. You can book with me on my website. I have Saturn readings. I have some other readings going up this fall, and I have some research projects in the works. So stay tuned. Alex?
You can find me at www.alexamorosi.com. You can book readings with me there. You can book my kitchen sink reading, which is everything I know how to do in one reading. And you can book energy healing and energy work with me there too, that we do distance over Zoom.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Alex and Alexandra, for indulging me on this incredible
It was
Mercury
great.
deep dive. I
So
love
fun.
it.
Hmm.
So we will see you all next weekend in September to cover a whole new slew of astrological topics. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.